Don't touch that key. The dock worker in the torn blue jumpsuit lunged toward the luxury sedan, her voice cutting through the hiss of white smoke. Min-jun froze, his hand hovering over the ignition of his billion-won Maybach. Behind him, suited men shifted nervously among the shipping containers. This woman, this stranger, with grease under her nails and a hole in her shoulder seam, had just told him his car was rigged to explode. The smoke thickened. Min-jun's meeting with Ghost was in 40 minutes. Miss it, and the truce collapses. Show up late, and his reputation crumbles. The engine ticked like a countdown clock. His men were securing the perimeter, too far to help, too far to stop what was already in motion. "Sir, your brake lines have been severed, and there's a thermal charge wired to your starter relay." Sandra stepped closer, hand steady despite the danger radiating from every corner of this industrial wasteland. Her jumpsuit was faded, her tools improvised. But her gaze, sharp, clinical, unwavering, held the precision of someone who'd seen inside machines most people couldn't even afford to look at. "You've got maybe 2 minutes before the heat triggers it." Ghost made sure it would look like an accident. Min-jun's finger twitched toward his phone. How could this dock worker possibly know about Ghost? How did she recognize military-grade sabotage in a vehicle that cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime? What kind of engineer was hiding in plain sight at the port of Busan? And why was she working on these docks instead of designing the machines she clearly understood better than anyone? In the next 90 seconds, everything Min-jun believed about loyalty, power, and who could be trusted would be incinerated completely. Because the woman reaching into his engine bay wasn't just a mechanic, she was the only person standing between him and the grave Ghost had already dug. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. We'll love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going. Min-jun's hand snapped back from the ignition, like he'd touched live wire. "You have 30 seconds to prove you're not insane," he said, his voice low and sharp as broken glass. "Or my men will remove you from this property in pieces." Sandra didn't flinch. She pulled a flashlight from her pocket, the cheap kind bought at a convenience store, and aimed it into the engine bay. "Look at the brake fluid reservoir. See that shimmer on the metal? That's not condensation. That's hydraulic fluid mixing with residue from a cutting torch." She moved the beam lower. "And those scorch marks on the starter housing? Fresh. Maybe 3 hours old. Someone knew exactly where to place a charge so it wouldn't show up on a visual inspection." Min-jun leaned in despite himself. The metal did look wrong. Too clean in some places, too dark in others. He'd built his empire by reading people, by knowing when someone was lying. But this woman wasn't selling him anything. She was stating facts, like a surgeon identifying tumors. "Anyone could fake burn marks," he said, but his conviction was already cracking. "Could anyone fake this?" Sandra reached deeper into the engine, her fingers tracing a wire that shouldn't have been there. It was thin, almost invisible against the black components. She followed it down to where it disappeared into the chassis. "This is Decord. Military grade. You turn that key, the electrical surge travels down this wire, hits the thermal charge they planted near your fuel line, and you become a statistic before you ever leave the parking space." The smoke billowing from the hood suddenly felt like a burial shroud. Min-jun's mouth went dry. He'd survived 3 assassination attempts in 5 years, 2 shootings, 1 poisoning. But this was surgical, invisible, the kind of death that would look like mechanical failure to anyone who didn't know better. "Who sent you?" His hand moved toward the gun at his hip. "Nobody sent me." Sandra straightened, meeting his eyes without fear. "I work here. 3rd shift, mostly. I was checking the cargo manifests when I saw your car roll in smoking like a barbecue. Figured I'd take a look before someone got hurt." She paused, letting the weight of that last word settle. Didn't realize it was your car until I saw the plates. Custom Korean issue. The kind that costs more than my entire life." Min-jun studied her. The jumpsuit was authentic, worn in the right places, stained with the kind of grease that took months to accumulate. But her hands moved with precision. Her eyes calculated angles and measurements, like she was reading blueprints in her head. This wasn't just some dock worker who knew how to change oil. "How do you know about thermal charges?" "I know about a lot of things." Sandra's jaw tightened. "And right now, you've got 35 minutes until your meeting. You want to stand here interrogating me, or do you want to live long enough to figure out who's trying to kill you?" Before Min-jun could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his blood turned to ice water. Ghost. "Where are you?" "Meeting starts in 35. Don't keep us waiting." The text was followed by a location pin. The warehouse district on the east side. Neutral territory. Except nothing about this felt neutral anymore. Min-jun stared at the message, his mind racing through calculations. Ghost had been his partner for 3 years. They'd built their operations together, splitting territories and profits down the middle. But partnerships in their world didn't last. Someone always got greedy. Someone always wanted more. "Bad news?" Sandra asked, watching his expression shift. "My business partner wants to know where I am." Min-jun looked at the smoking Maybach, then back at his phone. "The same partner who knew I'd be here, who knew I'd need to leave early for the meeting, who knew exactly which route I'd take." "Ghost," Sandra said quietly. It wasn't a question. Min-jun's head snapped up. "How do you know that name?" For the first time, something flickered across Sandra's face. Not fear, something deeper. Recognition. Memory. Because Ghost's signature is all over this sabotage. The thermal charge placement, the timing, the clean cuts on the brake lines. It's textbook black ops. The kind of work you see in military intelligence circles, or smuggling operations that use ex-military contractors. She met his stare. "I've seen this before. Different country, different victim, same outcome." The pieces started clicking together in Min-jun's mind, but he didn't have time to examine them. Not now. "Can you fix it?" "The charge, already disarmed." Sandra pulled the DT cord free, letting it dangle like a dead snake. "But your brakes are still cut, and even if I patch them, there's no guarantee Ghost didn't plant something else. If he wanted you dead this badly, he didn't stop at one failsafe." "How long to make? It's safe enough to drive?" Sandra glanced at the engine, then at the shipping yard around them. Her eyes swept over stacked containers, idle forklifts, maintenance sheds. 15 minutes if you've got the right parts. 20 if I have to improvise. You have 12. Then get your men to clear that shed. Sandra pointed to a corrugated metal structure near the fence line. "I need tools, brake fluid, and about 20 feet of hydraulic line. And tell them not to shoot me when I start pulling parts off the cargo trucks." Min-jun's phone buzzed again. Another message from Ghost. "Ghost." Tick-tock. He looked at Sandra, this stranger who'd materialized from nowhere, who knew things she shouldn't know, who moved with the confidence of someone who'd defused bombs before. Every instinct screamed that trusting her was suicide, but staying here was guaranteed death. And showing up to meet Ghost in a sabotaged car? That was just handing him the murder weapon. "Do it," Min-jun said already, signaling his men. "But if you're lying, if this is some elaborate setup, I'll make sure your death takes days." "If I'm lying," Sandra said, already moving toward the shed, "you won't live long enough to make good on that threat." She worked like a surgeon in an operating theater. No wasted movements, no hesitation. While Min-jun's guards secured the perimeter and watched her with the kind of suspicion reserved for walking explosives, Sandra dismantled a hydraulic assembly from a cargo truck with brutal efficiency. She didn't ask for help, didn't explain what she was doing, just worked. The brake lines were worse than she'd let on. not just cut. Precision severed at the exact points where failure would be catastrophic, but not immediately obvious. The kind of sabotage that would let Min-jun drive for a few blocks, maybe even make it to the highway, before the system failed completely. At 60 miles per hour, a car without brakes became a missile. Add in rush hour traffic and concrete barriers, and Ghost would have his clean accident. Sandra threaded the new hydraulic line through the chassis, her fingers moving in the cramped space like she had blueprints memorized. She muttered calculations under her breath, pressure ratios, fluid dynamics, tolerance margins. Min-jun watched from 3 feet away, his mind churning through scenarios. Who was this woman? What was she running from? And why did she know so much about the kind of violence that defined his world? "There," Sandra said, tightening the final connection. "Your brakes will hold, but you're still driving a compromised vehicle. I'd recommend, wait." Min-jun crouched beside her, his eyes narrowing at something near the undercarriage. "What's that?" Sandra followed his gaze. At first she didn't see it. The device was barely larger than a deck of cards, magnetic case clinging to the frame rail. But once she spotted it, recognition hit like a freight train. GPS tracker, active transmitter. She pulled it free, holding it up to the fading daylight. Military grade. Real-time monitoring with satellite uplink. Min-jun felt his chest tighten. How long has it been there? Sandra examined the weathering on the magnetic case, the dust patterns around its edges. At least a week, maybe longer. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw something like pity in her eyes. "Ghost has been watching every move you make, every meeting, every route, every safe house. He knows where you sleep, where you eat, where you're vulnerable." The implications crashed over Min-jun like a tsunami. Every conversation he'd had in the car, every location he'd visited, every secret he thought was protected. All of it compromised. All of it fed directly to the man who was supposed to be his partner. "He's been planning this for months," Min-jun said, his voice hollow. "Longer." Sandra turned the tracker over in her hands, her expression darkening. "This model costs about $30,000 on the black market. You don't spend that kind of money on a whim. This was premeditated, calculated. Ghost didn't just decide to kill you last week. He's been building toward this for a long time." Min-jun's phone buzzed for the 3rd time. He didn't need to look to know it was Ghost again. Probably something cheerful. Something designed to keep him calm, keep him moving toward the meeting where armed men would be waiting. But then Sandra's expression changed. She tilted the tracker, studying something on its casing. "This isn't just GPS," she said slowly. "See this secondary antenna? This is a full vehicle monitoring system. Ghost isn't just tracking your location. He's tapped into your car's computer, engine diagnostics, speed, fuel consumption, everything." Why would he need all that? Sandra's eyes met his, and he saw the answer before she spoke. Because he's not just watching you. He's controlling you. If this device is connected to your vehicle's CAN bus, and I'm betting it is, Ghost can access your car's systems remotely. Brakes, steering, acceleration. He could shut you down in the middle of a highway. Lock your doors. Disable your airbags. She paused, letting the full horror sink in. The thermal charge was Plan A, but if you somehow survived that, Ghost had an entire network of failsafes ready to deploy. Min-jun felt the ground shift beneath him. This wasn't just an assassination attempt. This was total information warfare. Ghost had turned his own vehicle, his fortress, his sanctuary, into a weapon aimed at his head. And the meeting? That was just the execution chamber, where Ghost would watch it all unfold in real time. "Can you remove it? Disable the connection?" Sandra shook her head. "Not without Ghost knowing. The second this signal drops, he'll know something's wrong. He'll either accelerate the timeline or abort completely and come at you from a different angle. She studied the device, her mind working through scenarios. But if we leave it active, he'll think everything is going according to plan, Minjun finished. His survival instincts, honed by years of staying alive in a world where trust was currencies and betrayal was cheap, kicked into overdrive. He'll think I'm driving a sabotaged car into his ambush. He'll think I'm already dead. Which gives us exactly one advantage. Sandra carefully reattached the tracker to the frame, making sure it sat exactly where it had been. Ghost is watching a ghost. He sees what he expects to see. But we know the truth. Minjun straightened, his mind already 3 moves ahead. How much of the car's systems can he access? Depends on how sophisticated his setup is. At minimum, probably engine control, braking, and steering. At maximum, everything. Climate control, windows, locks, entertainment system. Modern luxury cars are basically computers on wheels. If Ghost has the right access codes and a good hacker, he has both. Minjun's jaw clenched. His silent partner handles cybersecurity for half the shipping companies in East Asia. If anyone could crack a vehicle system, it's them. Sandra nodded slowly, pieces of a larger puzzle falling into place. Then we have to assume Ghost can see and control everything in this car, which means driving to that meeting is suicide. Unless, Minjun said, a dangerous edge creeping into his voice, we give him exactly what he's expecting to see, right up until the moment we don't. Sandra studied him, seeing the calculation in his eyes. This man hadn't survived as long as he had by being reckless. He was a strategist, a chess player who thought in sacrifices and gambits. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, Minjun said, pulling out his phone, that Ghost is about to learn why I didn't die in the last 3 attempts, because I don't play defense. He looked at Sandra, really looked at her for the first time, seeing not just the mechanic with grease-stained hands, but the engineer who understood. Systems, the strategist who'd recognized Ghost's signature, the survivor who'd clearly run from something or someone before. How do you feel about turning predator into prey? Sandra felt something click in her chest, something that had been dormant for 3 years, buried under the safety of anonymity and manual labor. The part of her that had once designed security systems for international corporations. The part that had uncovered Ghost's smuggling network and barely escaped with her life. The part that had been hiding ever since. I feel, she said carefully, like Ghost made a mistake leaving me alive the first time. Minjun's expression shifted. There it was, the confirmation that this woman had history with his partner. History that bled and burned. First time. Different city, different life. Sandra's voice went flat. I used to design automotive security systems for luxury manufacturers. Found some irregularities in our shipping manifests. Started digging, found Ghost's entire operation, how he was using our vehicles to smuggle weapons, drugs, laundered money. I reported it to my superiors. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Turned out my superiors were on Ghost's payroll. They tried to make me disappear. I ran instead. Been running ever since. Until now. Until now. Sandra met his stare, and Minjun saw the same hunger he felt, the need to turn the tables, to take back power from the people who thought they were untouchable. So, yes, I'm very interested in turning this around on Ghost, because he doesn't just want you dead, Minjun. He wants your entire operation. And once he has it, he'll expand. More smuggling, more weapons, more bodies. I've seen how this ends. It doesn't end. It metastasizes. Minjun's phone buzzed again. This time he looked. Ghost, 20 minutes. I have champagne waiting. Let's celebrate our continued partnership. The word continued felt like a knife between the ribs. Ghost thought he was clever. Thought his traps were invisible. Thought he'd orchestrated the perfect crime. "He's watching the tracker," Sandra said, glancing at the device still clinging to the undercarriage. "Probably wondering why you haven't started driving yet." "Let him wonder." Min-jun started typing a response, his fingers moving with deliberate calm. "Mechanical trouble. Fixed now. On my way." He hit send and looked at Sandra. "Get in. We're going to give Ghost the best performance of his life, right before we burn his entire operation to ash." Sandra hesitated for only a second. Then she grabbed her toolbox, climbed into the passenger seat, and closed the door. The Maybach's interior smelled like leather and danger. Through the windshield, she could see Min-jun's guards taking positions around the vehicle, their expressions carved from stone. Min-jun slid behind the wheel, his hand resting on the ignition. "Last chance to walk away." "Last chance for Ghost to run," Sandra countered. Min-jun smiled. A predator's smile, and turned the key. The engine roared to life, smooth and powerful. No explosion. No flames. Just the purr of German engineering and Korean determination. As they rolled through the shipping yard, Sandra pulled out her phone and started typing code into a terminal app. "If Ghost can monitor your systems, we can monitor his monitoring. I'm setting up a packet sniffer to see what data he's pulling and what commands he's sending. When he makes his move, we'll see it coming. And if we don't?" Sandra looked at him, her expression absolutely calm. "Then we improvise. I've gotten pretty good at that over the last 3 years." The Maybach slipped through the port's gates like a shark entering open water. Behind them, the shipping containers stood silent, witnesses to a trap that had failed and a war that was just beginning. Above them, satellites tracked their position, feeding data to a man who thought he'd already won. But in the front seat of a compromised luxury sedan, 2 people who'd survived impossible odds were about to teach Ghost a lesson he'd never forget. The most dangerous weapons aren't the ones you see coming. They're the ones you think you've already neutralized. The warehouse district looked exactly like what it was, a killing floor dressed up as neutral ground. Min-jun counted 6 vehicles in the lot, all positioned for quick exits. Ghost's signature move: always leave yourself an escape route while boxing in your target. The building itself was a gutted concrete shell, the kind of place where screams got swallowed by empty space and bodies disappeared into foundation pores. "He's got men on the roof," Sandra said quietly, her eyes tracking movement that Min-jun couldn't see. 3, maybe 4. Sniper positions covering all the exits. "How can you tell?" "The pigeons. They're avoiding the northwest corner. Something up there is making them nervous." She glanced at her phone, watching the data streams flowing from Ghost's monitoring system. "He's been pinging your location every 30 seconds. He knows exactly where you are." Min-jun parked the Maybach in the designated spot, isolated, exposed, perfect for an ambush. Through the windshield, he could see Ghost standing in the warehouse entrance, flanked by men in tactical gear that was too expensive to be anything but private military. Ghost himself looked like a corporate executive: tailored suit, polished shoes, smile that never reached his eyes. "When I get out," Min-jun said, "you stay here. Doors locked. If shooting starts, you drive away and don't look back." "Not a chance." Sandra was already checking the wiring she'd jury-rigged under the dashboard, a manual override that would let her control the car's essential systems, even if Ghost tried to lock them out remotely. "You walk in there alone, you're dead in 3 minutes. You walk in there with me hidden in the car, you've got a wild card he won't see coming. He'll scan the vehicle. Let him." Sandra slid down into the footwell, pulling her toolbox with her. "His scanners will show 1 heat signature in the driver's seat. Everything else will look like normal mechanical components. He's not expecting someone who knows how to hide in plain sight." Min-jun studied her for a long moment, weighing the odds. Then he nodded once and stepped out of the car, leaving the engine running. The moment his feet hit the pavement, he felt the weight of a dozen hidden guns tracking his movement. This was Ghost's territory now. Every angle calculated, every variable controlled, except one. "Min-jun," Ghost's voice carried across the lot, warm and false. "I was starting to worry. Heard you had car trouble." "Nothing I couldn't handle." Min-jun walked forward, his posture relaxed but ready. Behind him, the Maybach sat humming, looking like every other luxury vehicle in a world where power meant excess. "Let's talk about our future." "Absolutely. But first," Ghost gestured, and two men in tactical gear approached the Maybach with handheld scanners. "You understand. Trust, but verify." Min-jun watched them circle the car, their equipment sweeping for weapons, explosives, electronic devices. He could see Sandra's heat signature on their screens, a concentrated blob in the driver's seat area that dispersed naturally through the car's systems. Just another warm engine cooling in the evening air. The guards nodded to Ghost and stepped back. "Clean," one reported. "Excellent." Ghost's smile widened. "Then let's step inside and discuss how we're going to restructure our partnership." The word restructure hit like a bullet. Min-jun followed Ghost into the warehouse, his instincts screaming. The interior was worse than the exterior. Open sight lines, metal support beams that could hide shooters, a second-floor catwalk where shadows moved with tactical precision. This wasn't a meeting. This was an execution chamber with refreshments. Ghost led him to a table where champagne bottles sat, sweating in ice buckets. "I've been thinking," Ghost said, pouring 2 glasses, "about efficiency, about how much smoother our operations could run with unified leadership. No more splitting decisions, no more checking with partners before making moves." He handed Min-jun a glass. "What would you say to a merger?" "I'd say," Min-jun replied, not touching the drink, "that mergers usually benefit one party more than the other." "Perceptive as always." Ghost's mask slipped, just for a moment. "Which is why I'm offering you a choice. Sign over your territories and operations, retire comfortably, and I'll make sure your people are taken care of. Or you kill me and take them anyway." Min-jun set the glass down. "You've been planning this for months. The GPS tracker, the brake sabotage, this theatrical meeting. You wanted me to feel like I had options right up until the moment I didn't." Ghost's expression went cold. "So you found the tracker. Clever. Which means you know I've been watching everything. Your routes, your habits, your vulnerabilities. I own your entire security apparatus, Min-jun. Half your guards are on my payroll. Your communications are compromised. And that car outside?" He pulled out a tablet, showing a live feed of the Maybach systems. "I can shut it down with one command. Trap you inside. Do whatever I want while you watch helplessly." "Funny thing about traps," Min-jun said, his hand drifting toward his jacket. "They work both ways." Ghost's finger moved toward the tablet screen, but Min-jun was faster. The gun cleared his jacket in a blur, aimed directly at Ghost's head. The room exploded into motion, guards raising weapons, shouts echoing off concrete. The catwalk above suddenly alive with rifle barrels. "Drop it," Ghost said calmly, "or my men paint this warehouse with your brains." "Go ahead." Min-jun's aim didn't waver. "But I drop, you drop. And then your organization falls into chaos while everyone fights over the scraps. Not quite the clean takeover you wanted." Ghost's eyes narrowed. "You think you can shoot your way out of here? There are 20 guns pointed at you right now." "I don't need to shoot my way out," Min-jun smiled. "I just need to buy 30 seconds." In the Maybach, Sandra heard the commotion and knew the timeline had collapsed. She pulled herself up from the footwell, her fingers flying across her phone's screen. Ghost's monitoring system was fully active. She could see every command he was queuing up. Engine shutdown, door locks, fuel cutoff. He was about to turn Min-jun's escape route into a coffin. But Sandra had spent 3 years thinking about this moment. 3 years preparing for the day she'd face ghost systems again. And this time, she wasn't running. She typed 3 lines of code and hit execute. Ghost's tablet in the warehouse suddenly went haywire, its screen flashing error messages as Sandra's counter-hack tore through his access protocols. The GPS tracker's signal, instead of feeding him data, started feeding him false information. Location spoofing that showed the Maybach already halfway across the city. And the vehicle's control systems? They locked him out completely. Every administrative password changed in the span of 2 seconds. In the warehouse, Ghost stared at his tablet in disbelief. "What? That 30 seconds," Min-jun said, already moving, "is up." He fired twice, not at Ghost, but at the champagne bottles. They exploded in a shower of glass and foam, providing just enough chaos for Min-jun to dive behind a support beam as the warehouse erupted in gunfire. Bullets tore through the air where he'd been standing, ricocheting off concrete and metal. Ghost screamed orders, his careful ambush dissolving into a firefight he'd never planned for. Outside, Min-jun's guards, the ones who'd stayed loyal, who'd been positioned around the perimeter, moved in. They'd been waiting for the signal, watching for the moment their boss needed them. Now they poured into the warehouse from 3 sides, their own weapons drawn. And suddenly, Ghost's numerical advantage evaporated. Sandra threw the Maybach into reverse, tires screaming as she backed away from the kill zone. Min-jun burst through the warehouse's side door, running full sprint as bullets chased him across the pavement. He dove into the passenger seat, Sandra already accelerating before he'd fully closed the door. "Go!" he shouted, redundantly. The Maybach rocketed toward the lot's exit, Sandra's hands white-knuckled on the wheel. Behind them, Ghost emerged from the warehouse, his face twisted in rage. He raised his tablet, stabbing at the screen with desperate fury. "He's trying to lock the brakes," Sandra said, watching her phone's readout. "Trying to shut down the engine, trying everything." She jerked the wheel, dodging a cargo truck that had been positioned to block their escape. "But he's locked out. Every system, every command. I've got full control." They hit the main road, the Maybach's engine roaring with Bavarian fury. But Sandra's relief lasted exactly 3 seconds before her phone screamed an alert. "No, no, no, no." "What?" "He's not locked out. He was never locked out." Sandra's mind raced as she understood Ghost's real trap. The monitoring system was the decoy. He planted a second system, hardwired into the steering column. I didn't see it because I wasn't looking for redundancy. And now, the steering wheel jerked left, hard. Sandra fought it, but the car's electric power steering had been overridden remotely. They swerved across 2 lanes, horns blaring as other vehicles scattered. Min-jun grabbed the dashboard as Sandra wrestled with a machine that was no longer obeying her commands. "Ghost has direct control," she said through gritted teeth. "He's trying to crash us into oncoming traffic." The Maybach accelerated without warning, the throttle pinned at Ghost's command. They were doing 70 in a 45 zone, heading straight for an intersection where a delivery truck was about to cross. Sandra yanked the emergency brake. Nothing. Pumped the brakes. Nothing. The car was a missile now, and Ghost held the guidance system. "Can you override it?" Min-jun asked, his voice remarkably calm for a man facing death by high-speed collision. "Not from here." Sandra's eyes swept the dashboard, the center console, calculating angles and access points. "I need direct access to the steering column's wiring, which means I need to get under the dash while we're doing 80 miles per hour." "Then do it." Sandra didn't argue. She unbuckled, letting Min-jun slide across to take the wheel. Not that it mattered, since Ghost controlled everything, but it gave the illusion of control. She dropped into the footwell, her toolbox already open, pulling out wire cutters and electrical tape. The delivery truck loomed closer. 5 seconds to impact. Sandra's fingers found the wiring harness, tracing it back to where Ghost's secondary system had been spliced in. It was elegant work, she'd give him that. Professional installation that would survive routine maintenance checks. But elegant didn't mean invulnerable. 3 seconds. She cut 3 wires simultaneously, severing Ghost's connection to the steering control. The wheel suddenly went dead in Minjun's hands. No power assistance, pure mechanical linkage. He yanked it right with all his strength, and the Maybach responded, barely, skidding sideways as they missed the delivery truck by inches. "Brakes!" Minjun shouted. Sandra was already on it, finding the brake control circuit and hot wiring it to bypass Ghost's commands. The pedal went live under Minjun's foot, and he slammed it down. The Maybach shuddered, slowed, finally stopped in the middle of an empty parking lot, while around them, traffic honked and swerved and continued with the oblivious momentum of a city that didn't care about private wars. They sat there for a moment, breathing hard. Sandra's hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline, from the razor-edge precision of cutting wires while hurtling toward oblivion. Minjun stared at the dashboard like it had personally betrayed him. "He's going to try again," Sandra said quietly. "Ghost doesn't quit. He'll come at you with everything he has. Assassins, lawyers, political pressure. He's been building this empire for years. He won't let you destroy it. He already destroyed it himself." Minjun pulled out his phone, pulling up a video file. "See, while Ghost was busy trying to kill me, my loyal guards were busy being very thorough in that warehouse. They found Ghost's laptop, his communications, his financial records, everything he tried to hide, documented in excruciating detail. He showed her the screen, spreadsheets showing money laundering, weapon shipments, political bribes. This goes public. Ghost doesn't just lose his criminal empire. He loses his legitimate businesses, his political connections, everything. And you? I get to restructure my own operations, clean house, build something that doesn't rely on partners who think betrayal is a business strategy." Minjun looked at Sandra, really seeing her now. Not the dock worker with the torn jumpsuit, not the mechanic with grease under her nails, but the engineer who'd understood Ghost systems better than Ghost did. The strategist who'd saved his life twice in one night. The survivor who'd turned the tables on a man who thought he was untouchable. "I'm going to need someone to run my logistics operation. Someone who understands security systems, who can think 3 moves ahead, who doesn't flinch when the world catches fire." Sandra felt something shift in her chest. For 3 years, she'd been hiding, running, pretending to be less than she was, because being more had nearly gotten her killed. But hiding didn't stop men like Ghost. Running didn't make them go away. They just found new victims, built new empires, left new trails of bodies. "Legal logistics," she said carefully. "Emphasis on legal. Completely legal." Minjun smiled. "I'm getting too old for wars. Time to build something that lasts longer than the next assassination attempt. Then I'm in." Sandra looked at her hands, still shaking, still covered in grease and wire fragments. "But I have one condition. Ghost doesn't just lose his empire. He goes down. Completely. Prison, asset forfeiture, everything. I want him to feel what it's like to run with nowhere left to hide." "Consider it done." Minjun extended his hand. "Welcome to new management." Sandra shook it, her grip firm despite the trembling. Around them, the city continued its indifferent rhythm. Cars passing, lights changing, people living their lives unaware that tonight, in a warehouse and a parking lot, and the interior of a compromised luxury sedan, the balance of power had shifted. Ghost's empire was burning, Minjun's organization was transforming, and Sandra was no longer running, She was building, and this time, she'd make sure the foundation couldn't be sabotaged. Thank you for watching till the end. Want to see Ghost's downfall? Subscribe, hit that like, and comment where you're from. I love saying hello to each of you.